The secret to knitting crinkle fringe is using the right material, and the right material is 100% acrylic yarn. The Crinkle Fringe neck warmer is the perfect practice project and uses less than 2.5 ounces. Of course, you could make it longer and wider for a double wrap cowl, which needs about 5.5 ounces. And how do I know this? Because in just an afternoon, I made 5 variations of them. It's so addicting and so easy. Yet, they look great and feel wonderful and are such fun. And there's no need to swatch, just knit. Frankly, any flatbed machine with appropriately sized acrylic yarn can work. While the neck warmer could be done in stockinette stitch, I am adding faux cables for a little extra pizzazz. Faux cables and crinkle fringe are a match made in heaven. First, let's make some decisions. I want 3 columns of faux cables. As you will learn later in the video, faux cables are made by latching up the bars after the knitting is off the machine. So, you need to leave the needles out of work for each cable. But how many? Here's a good rule of thumb. Multiply the number of bars you plan to latch together times 3. To add a little ease, add 1 or 2 more, but it is not absolutely necessary. Likewise, if you want tighter cables, subtract a few. The companion pattern includes the calculations for a bunch of variations and arrangements, so follow the link in the description below to download your copy. Second, allow 4 needles to make the crinkle fringe on each end. This will yield fringe about 1.5 inches wide. Third, decide how many stitches between the faux cables. 5 to 7 needles is a very comfortable starting point. Once you make your first neck warmer, adjust the number as you desire. Fewer needles will make it skinnier, more will make it wider. Alternatively, adjust the number of columns. Based on my calculations, I need to work over a total of 62 needles. So let's set up the machine starting somewhere around needle 30 on the left. It does not have to be perfectly centered. Allow 4 needles for crinkle fringe, 5 needles for the left side panel. Push these needles to the work position. Leave 10 out of work for a 3-bar cable, 7 in work for an inside panel, 10 out of work for a second cable, 7 in work for an inside panel, 10 out of work for the third cable, and 5 needles in work for the right side panel. Of course, you need to add 4 more needles in work for the crinkle fringe. All I have to do is do an E-wrap cast on starting on the left and working over to the carriage. Now, when you get to this junction where there's a lot of needles out of work, I just jump over to here, give yourself a little slack, and E-wrap the next section and thread the machine. I also will hang my cast-on comb just because it keeps them from falling off. Now, I don't think I need the whole thing. Yeah, I can do it with just a portion of it. And I'm going to make sure that I don't capture the end yarn with the hooks. There we go. It's in place. And that gives us just enough weight. All right. I'm going to crank up my tension to 10 because I want this nice and comfortable, and this is a pretty thick red heart yarn. I'm also going to put my carriage in knit in both directions, and my row counter is 0. Now, all I have to do is knit the first row, and hear that chug, 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 chug. It's going to make that noise, but you'll get used to it. Okay, if you want to add a little more weight, go right ahead. And now I'm going to knit until my row counter is 108. I removed and took out the last 4 stitches because I wanted to move this end coming off of the 5th needle. So the last 4 I'm just going to pop off, slide it onto my yarn tail. Now, I don't need that much yarn tail, but I need to do it again so I've slid it off, and I'm going to cut it here. I'm just going to tie this so it doesn't get lost. I'm going to tie it loosely. There, it's knotted. I'll cut that away later. Now, just so I don't forget, I'm going to come down to the last 4 needles. Now this time I don't have to take any knitting out. I'm going to pop those off. And this time I don't need any more, so I'm just going to pull it through and tie this one off. So now I'm going to take my latch tool, unthread my machine, bring this to the back and around the end gate peg, and I'm going to bind off around the gate peg. So I just retracted that needle and then picked up that end right here and pulled it through. So I'm going to the second needle and just guiding it back, picking this up and pulling it through both. Now you want to do this not too tight. That's why I'm doing it around the gate pegs. And when you get to that end needle of that panel, you're going to pull this all the way through long enough so it reaches over to this side over here. Then I'm going to thread my yarn around the gate peg. So I'm adding 3 extra loops, but that's okay. So I'm going to pick that up there, pick up the yarn, and pull it through. And continue all the way to the end. And this is my last stitch. Oops. That's my last stitch. Now I'm going to cut my yarn, leaving about a 15-inch yarn tail. And pull the end all the way through. So now I'm going to just pop it off my gate pegs and I'm going to give it a good tug lengthwise. And I'm going to let it rest. And so now I'm going to block it. And I am going to kill it. This is the secret to getting the crinkle fringe. So we're going to work on it. And you see how curly that is? That edge is just curling under. We're going to literally kill it with steam. Now you can do this with an iron also. And it doesn't matter if you overdo it. But if you're using an iron, make sure you use a pressing cloth and lots of steam. I even block the strands across the middle here. Now that is pretty well killed. Before we go on to the next step, this needs to be completely dry. And you can see it spit out a little bit of the water onto it. We are ready to create the faux cables. On this particular neck warmer, the middle column was set up to have 13 needles out of work so that I can show you how a tight 5-bar cable differs from a 3-bar cable. You could create cables with the purl side or the knit side of the fabric facing you. You can also start from the cast-on edge or the bind-off edge or even alternate the direction. Whatever your preference, the cabling technique is all the same. To start, and this is the only part where you have to have some explanation, is insert your hook after the 3rd bar between the 3rd and the 4th bar, because this is a 3-bar stitch. Take your hook and point it off to the cast-on side. Bring it up and just twist it. What that did was that created a 3-bar loop on your hook. Now you just go and pick up under the next 3 bars and pull it through. Under the next 3 bars, pull it through. Under the next 3 bars, and you just keep going. And you can hold this up in your hand like this and just keep going, or you can lay it flat on a table surface if you prefer. You can also use a latch tool that comes with your knitting machine instead of a crochet hook. We're up at the end now, and we're down to the last few bars. So I'm going to take 3 here, and I have 3 plus 1. Just group that extra 1 in. Just use your judgment. It doesn't make any big difference. At the end of the column, temporarily pin the last loop of the edge to keep the stitches from running. These will be tied down later when the neck warmer is seamed. Now I'm going to let the crinkle out. So I'm just going to take my pair of scissors and cut my waist yarn and pull it out. And now I'm just going to pull it sideways and just pull it down. But you have to start on the bind off side. And this is not coming undone. And I've washed them and they do not come undone. Who thought frogging was going to be so much fun? Now I'm going to just catch the top 2 loops of this end stitch just to secure it down and get right into this stitch over here. Once I've started it correctly, then I just can go over to the next stitch and whip stitch it. Okay, so now I'm going to take off my loop that I had pinned down so it wouldn't run, and I'm going to take it in my hand. Okay, and for this one, I'm just going to bring my yarn up to the front and then through that loop, right in the center. On this side, I'm going to look for where the crossover is, and I'm going to insert my needle right into there. So do you see how this crosses over? I want to get right into the center of this one and then come up underneath this one. So I start in the loop and I'm going to pull that through. Now I'm going to stitch it a couple more times like that, and I'm not going to pull it up real tight. So I'm going to do that 4 times, and then I'm going to go through here and stitch through the stitch sideways. And then I'm going to stitch back through that same loop. I can come back through here and move over to pick up that first stitch over here. Then just continue across. Our crinkle fringe neck warmer is complete. Notice how the 5-bar cable in the center is more prominent than the 3-bar cables. And just how delightful the crinkle fringe is. Whatever you do, do not block the edges ever again. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please take a moment to subscribe and ring the bell to receive notifications of upcoming videos and events. Happy machine knitting!